and I honed my craft as best as I could. And I thought I was pretty competent, but then I started working with George. And no, and that, honestly, and that's when I realized I know nothing about design and art.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be jumping into the full unedited George Lucas San Diego Comic-Con panel. And I believe this was his first time actually doing a full-length Comic-Con appearance and Comic-Con panel. So it's a big deal. George Lucas doesn't make too many appearances in public where he's speaking about these things at length. Historically, when he has, he said things that have been true. And sometimes the truth is not exactly friendly, but adversarial to corporate interests. So I'm not watching this for controversy. I'm watching this because I love George Lucas. George Lucas created Star Wars. He created the universe that's given me so much inspiration, passion, and creativity and drive that's spilled into other parts of my life too, my work life, my personal life. That's made me, a better, more thoughtful person. So I'm really excited to watch this together with you. And I just want to make a quick note. This unedited video of George Lucas's full panel is brought to us by Star Wars Theory. That being said, if you want to see the full unedited panel yourself, go to his page, drop a like in the video, give him a subscription. He did pull some strings to get into this panel, and he did make this a very high quality video compared to the other videos that are out there. So it's a part of a larger vlog of when he went to San Diego Comic-Con. I'm going to jump straight to the part with George Lucas. If you want to see the whole unedited video with him talking to fans about his Saber company, his experiences, and a whole host of other things, definitely just check out the full video, and I'll drop a link in the description below. But that being said, let's jump right into the full George Lucas San Diego Comic-Con panel, courtesy of Star Wars Theory.
Clip if he needs it. All right. I feel so lucky somebody pitched me to be sitting here. Besides being a sci-fi nerd myself, I'm just so happy to be here to support two of my closest friends, George and his wife, Melody. Woo! This is such a historic moment, not just because it's George's first time.
Dude, he looks locked in, bro.
Not just because he brought the big guns with him, but because this is the very first time George has done a personal show and tell of the new museum.
Yes, this is for the new museum, by the way.
This place, it is incredible. It's chock full of pieces that George has been collecting over 50 years. I'm talking original character sketches, original matte paintings, illustrations. So watch very closely, because this little video you're about to see for the very first time, we're revealing some of those pieces that'll be on display. So, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to give to you the first sneak peek. Now, narrative art is storytelling through visual media. Cave paintings, comic books, graffiti, illustrations tell us a story. They evoke emotion in a way that goes beyond.
I don't know about graffiti, bro.
Sketch, or off the
maybe
street,
if it's
or
permitted.
A $5 million painting in the net. You put a superhero comic in a child's hands, and they immediately feel we must.
Not here for you, Quinn. We're here for George. So, all right, here we go.
In love with it. What is narrative art to you, and when did you first fall in love with it?
Well, I've been collecting art since I was in college, and back when I was in college, which is sort of near the Stone Age, the idea is that I couldn't really afford real art. I love all art, no matter what it is, but I could afford comic art, because in those days it was underground, and it was you sort of had to know people to get find out where there was a sort of a auction that was sent out on a mimeograph sheet and had some prices and names of art. And so I've been sort of collecting narrative art ever since then, because I could then, in college, I could get an alley-oop for $30. And because the comics were expensive, but the original art wasn't that expensive, because it was harder to come by.
But
And,
you managed to collect upwards of 40,000 pieces of art.
yeah, I've been doing this for 50 years now. And then it occurred to me that, what am I going to do with it all? Because I refuse to sell it. You know, I'm not one of the typical high art collectors who buys and then you come back 5 years later and you say, what happened to that painting you bought? That was so beautiful. Well, I sold it for $10 million. I made a lot of money on it. I said, I could never do that. It just is not what I think art is. I think it's more about...
And I wish more people that collected toys, for example, would share the wealth a little bit, right? Like, you go and you want to buy a toy. For example, Hasbro just sold a Black Series piece with Anakin and Obi-Wan. It's sold out in a second, and it's up on eBay for 3 times the price. Like, let people enjoy themselves. It doesn't have to be about profiteering. If you want to profiteer, just, you know, maybe find a kind of job that you can make more money with. But I think taking away the ability to buy stuff like toys and comics from other people and then selling it for 4 or 5 times the price, I think that's, at least for the purposes of a living, I think that's a little corny. And it's a little different from art, but it's kind of one and the same with the joy that it brings people.
I think it's more about a connection, an emotional connection with the work, not how much it cost or what celebrity did it or whatever. It's more a personal thing. And I don't think it's anything that anybody else can tell you. That's art, that's not art.
Absolutely, art is priceless.
If you have an emotional connection, then it's art. If you don't, then just move on to the next painting. And it's the idea that people can tell you what art is and talk about it. I've discovered just from my experience of making movies and things that, you know, other people's opinions don't mean much. The only thing that really means something is what you do and what you feel about it. And then if you see that other people react to it in a very emotional way, then you say, well, I did my job, that was good. But when people come who say they're experts and they say, oh, that's not art, that's not this, that's tough. And I've worked...
Well, I kind of sort of did that with the graffiti comment, but I guess art is not objective, it's subjective. So I guess, you know, a lesson that George is teaching me as I watch this video. But a cool little Star Wars thing, a lesson I learned with art and its prices and what's objective versus subjective. Excuse me, I bought Darth Vader issue number 3 from the 2015 run, and I bought it for $1,200 because it's a variant art, and the cover sheet is Darth Vader reaching down with his hand outstretched to Aphra, lifting her back up from the railing, similar to the situation where he told Luke, I'm your father. It's supposed to kind of pay homage to that scene, right? And I thought it was like one of the coolest pieces of art of all time. So even though I love Aphra and it's her first appearance, I had to have that particular cover because that piece, you know, it spoke to me in a way. I just think it was like the coolest thing. But the $1,200 comic value is determined by the buyers, right? And obviously that's everything. It's like economics lesson. That's the buyer sets the price. But in comic and art specifically, it really comes down to what someone wants to pay for it. That determines the value. But to me, this piece is priceless and I'll never sell it. Little personal experience, I guess, to relate to George's thing.
With hundreds of illustrators in my life, and they're all brilliant, they're all great, but they don't get recognized for anything. So this
Very
is
true.
sort of a temple to the people's art.
Temple to the people's art. Guillermo, you have some feelings about narrative art as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the beauty of art
Guillermo del Toro is very cool.
To
Death
hint
Stranding
at a
piece, where you
mystery
at?
and provide eloquence and emotion. And I think that when you have those two things and you realize that there is, once photography enters the picture, a lot of the art that is figurative starts to be looked frowned upon a lot more historically. And yet you realize that it is an art that captures a moment and an emotion for many, many people that is always able to express things that are not just propaganda once it's liberated from church and state. And particularly many of the pieces we have that celebrate Crazy Cat, certainly. Comics were the first one to punch Nazis. EC Comics had a lot of social conscience before or at the same time than movies and so forth. And you have graffiti, you have many of the popular mimeographed forms of art that do that. They are not dominated, and the museum, what is important for me or what is magical, is not a man and his collection. It's a lineage of images. A lineage of images that have been spoken, and we as storytellers and visual storytellers, we have that vocabulary to see where that thing came from, the etymology of that image. And when you think about that, you know, Noam Chomsky said, the limit of your language is the limit of your universe. If you cannot name something, you cannot own it. The same is true for images. And what is amazing about this collection, it will give you step by step how a form of expression came to inform what we are today. Because we are in a critical moment in which one of the things they'd like to disappear is the past. You know, and this is memorializing a popular, vociferous, expressive, and eloquent moment in our vision.
An interesting thing about what Guillermo said there, and I think it's been a problem for a very long time and a very big problem for young people. People don't like to study history, right? Like, people are not interested in past events. And history repeats itself when people don't study it because they don't know what's going on. So sidestep nerdiness and go into boring adultness. You should really know the basics of your history. Because if you don't, those rights that people fought for, events that happened before, they'll happen again. And it's a very interesting point that Guillermo brings up. And I don't think enough people realize that that's happening. History is a really beautiful thing. And you should have somewhat of a working knowledge about, you know, the important basics, which I think is lost upon a lot of people.
Past that belongs to all of us, and the museum celebrates this.
And you've compared, you've compared narrative
George,
art
like
to
that.
rock and roll.
Yeah.
How so?
Well, if you have every institution, if you look for illustration museum or illustrated narrative art museums, they're tiny places here and there. The declaration of principle that the size, scope, and majesty of this building say is basically this exists as an art form, you know, and it changes so minutely. Everybody here can argue who inks Jack Kirby better. You know, Simon and Kirby or Royer and Kirby, and it changes. That's how much is important. The size of the building is a temple that says this is an important thing. This is declared an art. Imagine for a moment that all we had was classical music and non-melodic music, and rock and roll had never been enshrined in a proper way as an art form. This is what this is doing. He's saying this is rock and roll and it needs to be enshrined.
From the sky. It's unbelievable. But we'll talk about that later. I was just blown away. Doug, I would like to ask you about, because you have a very, very interesting viewpoint on how narrative art has impacted your life.
Yeah.
Can you speak to that?
Okay, real quick. Doug Chiang is one of the biggest creators of like Star Wars concept art and things that made it into all forms of media, from the sequel movies, or excuse me, from the prequel movies to the sequel movies to the Clone Wars. Like, Doug Chiang is really very much like, it's almost like, you know, he's taken the thoughts out of the memory of Ralph McQuarrie's mind and he's completely put it back on paper. He, you know, along with few host of other people at Lucasfilm, you know, he's up there. When you think about the greats of Lucasfilm, you think George Lucas, because he made everything, and then Doug Chiang has to be up there too. His contributions to Star Wars are very important.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. I mean, I feel so incredibly honored
Doug
to
Chiang,
be
everybody.
here to celebrate narrative art.
Doug Chiang.
So what's amazing, and I haven't shared this before, but I grew up loving comic books, and that's how I fell in love with art. And it's one of those things where it was surprising because growing up as a kid in Michigan, you know, art, narrative art, comic book art, magazine illustrations were kind of looked down upon, and it was kind of sad. But it was a way for me to enjoy art, and it invited me to discover more about art. And what I love about what George and Melody are doing in creating this museum is that it's celebrating and acknowledging and giving respect to an art form that has really, you know, haven't been highlighted before. I mean, I think it's really time to celebrate the artists who have, you know, committed their whole careers to creating this, because it is really hard. And what's terrific for me is that, you know, as an aspiring artist when I was young, I wanted to draw. And this gave me a portal into this world to discover more about it. And what's wonderful about the museum is that it describes all the variety of forms of narrative art. You have Charles Schultz Peanuts, you have Winsor McKay, you have heavy metal magazines, then you have Norman Rockwell and Frank Frazetta and Mobius. Those are all different avenues for a kid to enjoy art and to entice them to come in. One of the things that I found kind of sad though was that, you know, when I was growing up, art, comic book art wasn't taken seriously. It was always diminished. It was kind of like, okay, Doug, you'll outgrow that someday. And I'm so glad I didn't.
I'm glad you did it. Relatable. I'm sure that so many in the audience can relate to using your art form as a way to just express yourself. And I'm sure you're creating beautiful art right now, today, and here showing it to one another as we speak. Doug, you had a beautiful story about how you work with George. How you kind of start the process. Explain how this collaboration works.
I could talk all day about that. You know, one of the funny things is that growing up, well, first, I mean, I was painfully shy, so that's why I gravitated towards art. Words were never my strength. Visual images were, and so as a kid, I really drew art, and I wanted to learn more about, you know, how to create storytelling, story art. And my earliest forms were actually almost like silent movies where I created panels. And it's very much like comic books. It's very much like what we're celebrating here. And one of the things that I kind of honed my skills growing up, because, you know, when I saw Star Wars, it was transformative for me because it opened up a whole world of people behind the scenes creating the art that I loved growing up. And this was never really exposed to me before. And that's why I think, you know, the museum is going to highlight a good portion of that. But what it did was it allowed me to start learning about art. I didn't go to art school, I'm self-taught, but I started to really find as many magazines as possible, and I honed my craft as best as I could. And I thought I was pretty competent, but then I started working with George. Honestly, and that's when I realized I know nothing about design and art, narrative design and art. I knew about industrial design, I could do product designs, I could do cool spaceships, but that's not what narrative art is. Narrative art is driven by story. Story comes first. The art comes second. And it was one of the biggest lessons that I learned because, as you'll see in some of my...
Yeah, and that, you know, to his credit, when you read, if you go look at the actual George Lucas scripts where people criticize him for being clunky and the dialogue being very like, I love you too. Okay, let's have dinner. Okay, let's go to the park. Even though his scripts sometimes come off like that, everything is born out of it. It's kind of like the soil that gives way to the water, which gives way to the plants and the seeds and all that stuff. So I think that's kind of the case here with what Doug is describing. The story comes first. The base of the house comes first. You cannot build a house without having a foundation first. And I think George lays out the foundation so beautifully. Obviously, he built it up himself with his own story writing and inspiration from other different works and his own thoughts and ideas. But to Doug's point, and I guess for artists out there, for you to get to the cool part of what you want to do, you kind of have to grind out and work really hard. It's like saving to buy a home. If you want to have the most beautiful apartment or house in the world, you're going to have to go do a lot of things that you don't want to do and spend times in ways you don't want to spend time and sacrifice a lot of your personal time. So I guess that this art lesson that we're getting here, it applies in so many different ways in life.
Early art on the prequels, they weren't very successful because I was designing in isolation without context, you know, and part of it was because I didn't know what the story was. But the designs were always kind of presented as, okay, like these are kind of individual items. And I was forgetting about the connection of how those designs fit into the overall picture of the story. Later on, you'll see that I slowly started to evolve because I started to take lessons from George where I learned, no, those designs need history, they need context, and they need to fit within the scenes. So I started to present designs within the context of a scene. I started to invent the scenes to try to see and validate the designs. And it's one of those things that I learned from George where cinematic narrative design is very specific. It's story driven.
Guillermo, you look like one to jump in on.
Well, no, I think that we all live design every day. If you design a wardrobe, think about your wardrobe. The same shirt, one button down, two buttons down, rolled, not rolled. A card says the way you dress, the way you move, everything you use tells something about your culture. What you favor is, that has to be imbued in the design. But the most important thing right now, and the reason why we must defend this as an individual expression, there is one of the other things that I find oppressive is people saying you can do art with an app. And I'm sorry, you can't. It's like you cannot just press a button and get to the middle, because then you will not know the beginning or the end of that idea for yourself. And when people say to you that they're saying,
and that's going to be the big difference with storytelling and content creation as time goes forward. The inception of the idea, the inspiration of the ideas, what's carrying that idea from point A to point Z for you? What's getting you from the start of the inception in your mind all the way to the finished product? And even though ChatGPT or whatever AI like Grok can generate that final product for you, it's not about necessarily what the AI can generate. It's more so for the art form and generating your story or your YouTube video or whatever you're trying to manifest in your life. It's the road that got you there. That's what gives it meaning. And AI and computers can't give meaning to things, right? It's the human aspect, whether the human aspect is decorating with the AI art made. But what's deeper than that is the person who originally designed it without prompts, right? Who have real artistic skill, who have real ideas in their mind, and they go through the steps and they create something truly beautiful at the end of the day. So it's going to be a very interesting battle to see exactly what's going to happen with AI art, movie making over the next few years. I think it's going to go, my prediction, it's going to be very AI heavy, very AI oriented. And when people realize the loss in humanity in terms of the input and the inspiration into these art pieces, people are going to start to see it and they're going to dial it back down. It's like the pendulum. The pendulum swings no matter where you go in life.
art is not that important, but it is. It is. And I think the way he's talking about art and narrative is the difference between eye candy and eye protein. Eye candy is an ornament, eye protein is nutritive. It's a story. That's the difference.
I like
and
that.
The difference is personality, knowledge, and emotion. Those are the three things that need to exist. And I'm sorry, they don't come in a fucking app.
This museum is dedicated to the idea that stories, mythology, any kind of story, that is written to affect people and to build community is extremely important to society and creating societies and creating community. Art illustrates that story. And that's the right hand of building a community is you need the art to make it seem real. Even, back in the whether it's the Renaissance or the Stone Age, you'll always have a story that people believe, it's mythology, it's not really true, but people believe it and it binds them together with a common belief system. That common belief system is what is really important. And what we're doing here with the museum is to try to make people aware of the mythology that we live by, and at the same time, let them have an emotional experience looking at art that does tell the modern mythology. And as Doug pointed out, it's more of an exact science than people think it is. And it's a way, the art part of it, is a way of making it really accessible to people and make it so they believe it.
I've heard you speak to that in our conversations a lot lately, and Guillermo, you just said the E word, and George said the E word. Y'all probably like, what the hell is the E word?
I also use the F word. I'm alphabetical.
Say as many F words as you want. But the connection that I always hear, that I've constantly heard in just our various conversations, is emotion.
Yes.
An emotional connection that the art, evokes an emotion from you.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the most important things to never forget. I think when people step into this museum, they will be emotionally affected.
Yo, shout out to the cameraman. This guy's just holding the thing up the whole freaking time.
Connection to it, because it's just absolutely
goated.
Stunningly beautiful and intriguing, done differently than anything I've ever seen. But once they get inside, the things that they see, they will have an emotional connection to personally. And which to me, I think will endear everyone in this audience. So please make it your business to get to Los Angeles to check out the Lucas Museum of Narrative Art. But let me tell you again some of the things that are actually found inside the museum, if you just forgot. Very first Flash Gordon, very first character drawing from Flash Gordon from 1934. Original, as in you can see the smudges by all the hands that touched it on the way to get it produced. Never been on display before anywhere, ever. Original sketches from the Peanuts comics from the 50s and 60s. Who, my Charlie Brown? My Snoopy? What? Did y'all not love Lucy kicking the football? Exactly. Come on, the Great Pumpkin. With Sally sat in there all that time. We can go on this. Check this out. Drawn on board with graphite with little text taped to the top and editorial notes written on the side. It's amazing. Original drawings from Iron Man's first cover in 1968. Wow. And an original pen and ink splash of Black Panther from 1968. Now we can go on and on, but this leads me to my next question.
Bro, I got to say some Star Wars stuff, man. Come on.
George, you told me it was important for society to have a museum honoring these kinds of art pieces. Tell them that story about the Rockwell painting.
Okay.
The Thanksgiving one that you have. And, I thought that was a lovely story.
Well, again, one of the things that we do with is the history of illustration, because this really is about illustration and about the mythology that creates the stories, and the orators who, like in Greece, were highly respected above everybody because the stories were so important. These are the things that we believe in. Some people believe in science, but science is an opinion. It's not real any more than stories are real. But the idea of the common mythology that we believe in today, like love and community, and all of it, we've got like 33, 40 different galleries, and those galleries all are illustrations of a particular mythology that we live with today. Whether it's love, whether it's work, whether it's, these are all not real, but it's an idea that gives us a common belief system. And in a common belief system, you can't build anything. You can't build pyramids, you can't build palaces, you can't build airplanes, you can't do anything by yourself. You have to have people you can do it with. And one of the issues, ultimately, one is family, is that most, I believe, and I think most people believe, that most families are dysfunctional. You always have somebody in there who, okay, we'll kind of live with him a little bit, but or her. But the thing about the Rockwell painting that she's talking about is that you know, it's a group of paintings are called the Four Freedoms. One of them is the freedom from want. And what it is a painting of mom bringing in a turkey and everybody's sitting around the table all smiles and looking and everything. You know, the idea that Uncle Jim is drunk over the quarter, or Sally and Billy are going to get divorced because they're having a huge argument, all that is not mentioned. But what it does say is the modern mythology is not that the Indians fed the pilgrims and saved them from starvation, because that would have gone away a long time ago. What it's really about is family. And people go to Thanksgiving and inevitably say, oh God, I don't want to do this again. You know, it's going to be fights, it's going to be this, you know, and I have to deal with my dad, I have to deal, you know, it's all kind of, oh, well, I guess I've got to. Well, you've got to, because that painting tells you that family is important. It's part of what we need to keep society together, even if it's tough. And that's, a lot of the art centers around those ideas of what we believe in and how important that is to us to have a community and to be able to build off of a common belief. And it's especially together today because of the fact that the world is becoming a smaller place. There are a lot of different common beliefs out there. It used to be easy because they were far away and it was hard to get to the, you know, interact with that. But now we're experiencing, in a lot of ways, the fact that there's a lot of different beliefs and there's a lot that aren't common. And the society cannot exist without a common belief system. And that's where illustration is vital, to show you what that means in everyday life.
That was a really intense answer, and I had like all these things going through my mind about my family and my experiences growing up, and you know, political beliefs and what it means for the world around us, and different belief systems, and how in our society today there's so many different belief systems. It's almost like we're fractured. And maybe, you know, I'm American, right? Maybe as Americans we're fractured and we don't have that common belief system anymore because there's so many different kinds of belief systems, different political parties, different, you know, very partisan ideas, some of which I'm guilty of, you know, having leaned into as well, right? I think we all are. I think it's natural, right? But I like George's message here that the Rockwell art conveys, that I haven't seen the art myself, and the art of Thanksgiving, is that even though family's tough, you still show up and you still support that common cause together, because through tough times there's love, there's being united. And even though you have problems amongst each other, even though in society you have different fractures and groups amongst each other, you have to come together for a common cause because you all love each other. And at the very least, if you don't love each other, you love the family that you have and the society and the structure that you live in. So very well spoken by George. And what's also really, really cool about what George just said, you know, it's funny. We're 31 minutes into this video, probably about 28 to 25 minutes into the panel. And they really haven't spoken about Star Wars, but they've spoken about family, being united, different kinds of paintings that convey these large themes, different kind of paintings that feed into mythology and also teach these lessons to people, right? And they're not partisan lessons. They are real life lessons, right? All these themes he's talking about with family, from the basics of that painting, right? It's in Star Wars. When you watch George Lucas speak about Star Wars in the past, he always says that Star Wars is not about laser battles and spaceships. And even though it's the stuff we love and the lore I love that my channel's about, Star Wars is really about the family nucleus. It's really about good and evil. It's about these large, sweeping things that look easy at face value, but they're actually very complex when you dive into it. So when you watch this panel and you listen to George talk about these things that are not so Star Wars-y, but relate to us in everyday life, you can also realize that these lessons he's talking about, life, love, family, hardship, being united, that's actually all in Star Wars. And it's really cool to see how George Lucas has used these art mediums, has used these overarching themes that he's learned about from these art pieces about something as simple as Thanksgiving, and how he's applied it to Star Wars and to another mythology. To not only create a mythology, but also maybe to convey these important lessons to us as people in everyday life. Very, very, very cool. And very, very, very important.
Provides us. So if these things are enshrined in the principles that make this not, look, this is a museum where you're not going to have superimposed anybody's worth or value for the pieces. Like George says,
I love that. It's all interpreted.
Until one speaks to you. There is not an imposed value that this, you must like this. You know, Da Vinci said, to paint likeness is easy, to paint emotion is hard. And these are all very emotional pieces, and they celebrate things that belong to all of us. One of the reasons we are all here, one of the reasons is that popular mythology in forms of comic books of any kind, I don't care if you like underground comics or edgy comics that, you know, have nothing to do with genre, or you like a genre piece, is that we all can access those emotions. That's why they don't belong to the man, they don't belong to the power, they don't belong to our parents, they belong to us. And I think this is celebrating things that speak to all of us collectively but individually. So the size of the museum, again, declares this in existence in a way that is a singularity in the world right now. And something that can celebrate that form of art.
Doug, did you have a thought?
Yes, about George is that he leads from the heart. And this museum
Yeah, he does, and you can see that.
I mean, it's his gift to sort of help celebrate this. And what I really enjoy about it, honestly, is that, you know, narrative art is a way to educate kids and to sort of like validate and say it's okay to, you know, draw your fantasy, draw things from your mind, embrace comic books. It shouldn't be looked down upon. And what's fantastic is that I think the museum, my hope is that it will inspire, you know, the next Norman Rockwell or Frank Frazetta.
Yeah?
Thank you, George. George?
What am I, what's the question?
I thought you were about to say something.
Huh?
I thought you were going to say something.
No.
I was going to let you. Let's talk a little bit about the actual details of the museum, because I found this very curious. The attention to detail. There are no right angles in the entire museum. Everything in the museum
It's
is
circular?
curved.
That's so cool.
Tell me a little bit about that. What was the thought behind that Yankson might have had, or did you
Well,
want that?
in my life, when I started out, I wanted to be an architect, and then I realized that it actually involved a lot of math. And I decided that wasn't such a good idea. So then I went to building cars and racing cars, and almost got killed.
I can't
Decided that
imagine
probably wasn't a good
George
idea
Lucas,
either.
the race car driver.
But then I went, and I didn't do that well in high school. So I decided, well, as I was in the hospital recuperating from a car accident, I said, well, maybe I'll just go to junior college, and because this was during the Vietnam War, and there was a certain advantage to going to the college. So I went to college, and I liked social science. It was always very important to me. And so
I like that George was honest about that. A lot of bad things happened to a lot of good people during Vietnam, and I have friends whose fathers were drafted, and on account of what my friends have told me, and having spoken to some war vets of Vietnam in particular, and even, you know, the more recent war on terror and the guys who came back and saw combat, but in particular Vietnam, you know, those soldiers were not well received. They weren't treated well, and they were kind of left for dead. So, you know, my heart goes out to all veterans, all members of the service, any uniformed member of the service, whether you're domestic or abroad. And sidetracking a little bit, but you know, that comment makes me think of them. So, you know, if there are any veterans or active members of service or police officers, firefighters that watch my channel and are seeing this, you know, my heart is always with you guys, and thank you for your service.
I decided I'd just take a lot of social science classes because it really was something I was interested in, and I got really hooked on anthropology and fell under the sway of
Could you imagine how different life would be if George Lucas went and got drafted to Vietnam and, you know, God forbid, died in Vietnam like so many others did? Can you imagine how different our society would be? Can you imagine how different film would be? Star Wars and George Lucas inspired basically all film now. From the concept of film to the concept of plot and ideas and stories, well into graphics, green screens, and production design and value. Life would be different in a significant way, artistically speaking, if George Lucas never created these things, and his team and all the people who helped bring those visions to light with him as well. But it all starts with George.
He was actually more of an English teacher, but at the same time he was really a mythologist and somebody who really understood mythology, which I really was extremely interested in, and which really comes from a time when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my mom would put me to bed, and I asked her a question, and I said, "Mom, if there's only one God, why are there so many different religions?" And she really couldn't answer that. But I've spent the rest of my life trying to answer that, and I come to the conclusion that I believe in God, but I have no idea what God is, and I don't think anybody does, because that's the thing where a very, very human nature is that when you're born, the baseline is fear. And as you go through life, you're curious about things, but you're especially curious about things you don't understand, and therefore that's a threat to you. And as a result, you make up stories to make it feel good. Well, you know, it goes dark periodically. Why does it? What happens if the sun if it doesn't get day? It's just night. What happens if and back in the Greek times, they said, well, it's, you got Apollo, he's a god, and he has a chariot, it's on fire, and when it flies over, it's all daytime. Yeah. At night, it's dark. Oh, I feel better now. And
you know what's so crazy about that is a lot of mythology is that it was meant to comfort people from the unknown. And you know, I believe in God too, but I don't know what's out there, and I don't think well, no one does. No one knows what happens when the light goes off in your mind and you pass away onto another life or whatever. No one knows. But George is right about that, and that comes from art too, is that a lot of art was created to comfort people. These stories were meant to give people something to believe in, but also offer them the comfort from the unknown that is the rest of our lives.
It's true. It's stories that make you feel connected to other people, but it also gets rid of some of the problems that you have about the fact that you have to know everything. And of course, one of the real problems we have is humans think they know everything, even though they don't know anything. You know, they're very, you know, if you take the universe, we know so little about what's going on that it's just, you know, and that's one thing that this kind of art will celebrate in a way, because we have science fiction. Science fiction is a myth. We have made it real, but we've made it real because of science fiction books and art. And so that makes people say, oh, well, we could go to the moon, you know? And once that idea is implanted, then we sort of believe we can do it. But the real problem, as I say, we think, well, we can go to the moon, we can go anywhere. No, I don't think so. Everything is in elements that are so huge, so vast, so impossible to understand for a human being that you can't depend on what we know, and you can't really, you can be inspired by what we think we know. But in the end,
Guillermo, you look like you want to get in there. What do you think?
And I want to get in there too, and I want to add something. And you know, feel free to skip around the videos. But to his point, we talk about interstellar travel and, you know, the speed of light and not being able to see beyond the speed of light or move beyond the speed of light. There are allegations and there are theories from scientists that there are places in the galaxy where there are different laws of physics. So, you know, our knowledge is bound by what we understand and what we know. But the universe is infinite. Just like my channel is infinite, the universe is infinite, right? And it's limitless. The different variations of laws could also be limitless. And I don't mean legal laws. I mean laws of physics, the laws of life. There's a lot of things that people don't know about. So don't get so caught up in like the sciences sometimes too. And I'm not saying be some super mythological believer of Apollo and all this stuff. I'm just saying that it's okay to question beyond that, because there is a good likelihood that there is a beyond that. And even though you might be far off the mark, the scientists that are telling you certain things are also far off the mark too. Just don't know what those parameters are yet. So very interesting. I always think about that when I think about, you know, humans going to other planets and stuff like that. You know, it's science is like, this is not possible. This is impossible. I'm like, well, you think that because you're playing by the rule set that you're aware of, but you're not aware of the rules that haven't been written yet or are written yet and haven't been presented to you yet. It's kind of like you're playing a board game and there's a second rule book that the game manager hasn't brought into play yet.
I was, I think it's the shape of the museum. I said, I'm going to start moving some of the stuff out. I draw the line at 3 houses full of stuff. I got to be a little more. And now that this museum exists, a lot of it may go there, you know, because it's beautiful to share, and that's why we are here. We are here. I said the other day, you are in this world to be a host or a guest. If you're a guest, you will never be happy. If you're a host, you will always be happy to serve. And this museum is hosting that type of art. And it's a continuum that belongs to all of us.
Let's go, man.
Yeah, man. So got to give this guy credit too. This is the guy who got Star Wars Theory the ticket, I believe. His YouTube channel is Soups. He's got a few 100,000 subscribers. I'm not too sure what his channel's about, but definitely go check him out. I'm sure Star Wars Theory's got a link to his stuff in his channel, or excuse me, in his description below. So that was a pretty cool panel. And even though George didn't directly talk about Star Wars necessarily, a lot of what he talked about did inspire Star Wars. And it should also inspire us. It's interesting to see how you can in real time kind of connect these dots over to what Star Wars is really about, which is family, love, perseverance, good versus evil, is large overarching themes. And it was really cool to gain the insight into what inspired George Lucas to not only create Star Wars, but also put these ideas into this museum he's coming out with. But to me, it seems like when you look at George Lucas's overall worldview, his inspirations, and his interpretations and emotional connections with art, they really are all implanted in the original 6 Star Wars films, and they teach so many lessons. And that's why Star Wars has been around for 50 years. This was a really cool panel to see. Shout out to Star Wars Theory for being able to actually go to San Diego Comic-Con. Shout out to his cameraman for doing incredible camera work, capturing this in a nice, beautiful, clean cinematic view, so I didn't have to sit there and look at like a janky iPhone. This was really, really awesome, guys. I felt like I was there with you guys watching the panel, and it was just truly awesome to see. So, and also, if you didn't notice throughout the video, there is a logo for Theory Sabers. I have one over there myself. This isn't a paid or sponsored video. I paid for the saber out of pocket. I never owned my own lightsaber before, and I really, really wanted that particular lightsaber. Actually, hold on. So I made the great journey over there to grab my theory saber, and I always wanted my own version of Luke Skywalker's Episode 6 lightsaber. It's my favorite lightsaber, and not a paid sponsor video, but I'm sure you see in the logo over there, it is the Theory Sabers logo. And, you know, quick little plug, this is a really, really cool product. I have the Profi one, and I have 2 reviews on my channel when I first got it, and an updated one year later. So definitely go check that stuff out too. And also big shout out to the organizers of San Diego Comic-Con who made this panel possible. The knowledge of George Lucas is knowledge that should be spread to everyone across the world, because the man is truly an inspiration. He's a good person, and I think the way he sees art and the way he understands how art is conveyed from one point to the other, it's truly for the better of society. It's truly for the better of storytelling. And as you've seen in this panel, it really is for the common good of man, making society a better place through good storytelling and important storytelling. To me, it felt like I was there, and it truly felt like a privilege to actually experience this firsthand with you guys. It was honestly truly an awesome and humbling experience for me personally, and I hope you guys got the same thing out of it too. So with that being said, thanks for watching this video. Please drop a like down below. It helps the channel. Please subscribe, share this video with your friends, repost it on Twitter. Let's get the channel growing a little bit. If you want to hang out with me, definitely go check out the Discord as well, or you can reach out to me directly on X if you want a link and do some sort of podcast or content otherwise together. And as always, guys, stay safe, and may the Force be with you always.